السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. هي بلدة رفح في قطاع غزة المحاصر التي شهدت التحام الدم والشهادة بين الفلسطينيين والناشطين الغربيين الذين آمنوا بعدالة القضية الفلسطينية وبأحقية عودة اللاجئين الفلسطينيين إلى ديارهم. وقصة أمهات ما فتئت جروحهن تنزف على فقدان أبنائهن دفاعا عن أطفال فلسطين المحتلة وأبنائها. وفي مناسبة عيد الام نتحدث من الداخل مع أم الشهيدة الأمريكية رايشل كوري وأم الشهيد البريطاني توم هورندال. معكم زينب صفار، تابعونا.
I'm here because I care. I'm here because children everywhere are suffering. But we've got to understand that they are us. We are them.
هي كلمات مقرونة بالأفعال عبرت عنها أيقونة الانتفاضة الفلسطينية وحركة التضامن الدولية المناضلة رايشل كوري. منذ 15 عاما ارتوت أرض بلدة رفح في خان يونس بقطاع غزة المحتل ليس بدماء شهداء فلسطين فقط، بل بدماء ناشطين غربيين في ريعان الشباب تركوا بيوتهم وحياتهم ومراحهم وقرروا أن يدافعوا عن أطفال فلسطين لإيمانهم الراسخ بعدالة القضية الفلسطينية وأحقية أهلها بالعودة والبقاء والحياة. هما الأمريكية رايشل كوري والبريطاني توم هورندال، ناشطان في حركة التضامن الدولية مع القضية الفلسطينية. رايشل دهستها جرافة الاحتلال الإسرائيلي الكاتربيلر فيما كانت تمنعها من هدم منزل لأحد أبناء الحي في رفح. أما المصور الصحفي الشاب توم فأصيب بطلق ناري في رأسه فيما كان يحاول إنقاذ فتيات صغيرات من إطلاق نار إسرائيلي، وما لبث أن دخل في غيبوبة دامت 9 أشهر ليفارق الحياة بعدها في مستشفى بلندن. اليوم الميادين تلتقي والدتي الشهيدين رايشل وتوم، حيث نتحدث معهما من الداخل عن الذكرى 15 لرحيل ولديهما وآلام الفراق وحرقة الفقد والحنين والامل، ولا سيما في ذكرى عيد الام. فما هي الرسالة وماذا تقولان لولديهما اللذين فارقا الحياة بأجسادهما، لكن ذكرهما وروحهما تبقى شعلة تضيء وتغير حياة الكثيرين الذين باتوا اليوم أكثر تمسكا بأحقية عودة الفلسطينيين إلى الأرض.
You know, Rachel would create things for me for Mother's Day. So the kinds of gifts that I received from her would be a drawing or a painting. Some of them are now in my house and I look at them. I think I would say to Rachel how much I miss her, but how much she is very much a part of my experience every day. She continues to be. I think those of us who have experienced losses know that loss is in some ways not the right word, English word, for what happens, because the person that we loved, I think we continue to feel that love, and to, in this case, I would want Rachel to know that I draw a lot of encouragement from all that she taught us. All that we learned from her. I'd want her to know about the opportunity that we've had to connect to this part of the world and to the people of Palestine, and also to let her know that we carry on. You know, that her family, her community of Olympia, Washington, that we carry on the work that she brought us to.
Okay, now I just want, people wonder, Cindy, why did Raishel leave her home to go to Palestine to take part in the all the activities that she embarked on taking in the occupied territories in a war zone to help the children. Why did she decide to leave everything behind as a young girl and try to join the Palestinians in their struggle against the Israelis?
Rachel was 23.
Yes.
She had completed all of her study at the Evergreen State College in Olympia, where we live.
So she wasn't a loser?
No,
yes.
No. She was always, I think, searching. She'd been introduced to the idea of the world being your community. That idea was introduced to her when she was a child. She was in a public school program in Olympia called the Options Program, and part of what we focused on in that program was that children should feel empowered in the world, that people should feel empowered to act in the world, and that your community wasn't just your neighborhood, but, well, in a sense it was your neighborhood, but that your neighborhood was global. So that was something she had grown up thinking about, concern about it. She was trying to educate me, to help me to understand the situation and what she was going to be doing. She started that education process for her family before she left. But, you know, in my heart, to be honest, you know, I wish she would have chosen something else. That's at the time, that's what I thought, something that felt maybe safer. I didn't know a lot about what was truly happening on the ground.
But as you said, ma'am, that she tried to educate you, to let you know what was really going on, and this was also manifested in the emails that she has or she exchanged with you. We know that Raishel was a gifted writer and observer. Following her death, her emails from Palestine received worldwide attention and inspired many people. Those emails and other pieces she wrote during her life were turned into a theatrical play titled My Name is Raishel Corey, and later published in a book titled Let Me Stand Alone. What did Raishel tell you in these emails about the Palestinian families and life in the occupied territories?
Well, I think the most important thing that she did was just to bring individual families to us, to help us to see what their lives were like on a day-to-day basis, and to humanize really the Palestinian people for her family and for her friends that were reading those emails. And she told us, of course, startling things, very concerning things about a child that had been killed, and how all the little children that she was talking to would point to his shaheed picture on the wall, and this was their friend, and he had been killed. Unfortunately, there were many Palestinians who were being killed in Gaza at this time. So some of the stories were shattering that she was telling us about. But there was also that mix of what families were doing to try to remain calm and to keep their children calm. The family whose house she stood in front of, they couldn't all leave the house at the same time, because if they did, the Israeli military would come in and say that it had been abandoned and take it down while
demolish
they were away.
The house, yeah.
So somebody in the family had to be in the house at all times. So intermixed with the reality of what families were living with the terror of all of that, was also the family, you know, the grandmother helping her, making sure she had lemony medicine to take or a drink to take when she wasn't feeling well, and that kind of thing. So it was just a very personal
Did she attempt to change your state of mind? I mean, towards did you know that this was the state of the Palestinians?
No, I didn't, and nor did most of my family. I remember asking my son, who was in Washington, D.C., working at the time, what do you think about what Raishel is sharing? Because she was sending this to anybody that would listen.
So it cost you the life of Raishel to get engaged and involved in the Palestinian struggle?
Absolutely.
What was her
Well, it wouldn't have taken it would not have taken losing her life for that to happen, because she was helping us to do that by what she was writing. It changed our views.
It changed your views.
And then when we learned, I mean, the worst, within the first hour after she was killed, I remember a cousin called, and the first word, because he had heard it on the news, and he had to talk to us. And I remember that my first words to him were, "We have to get her words out." And that was because I knew that's what she wanted. She wanted to be a witness.
So what was her ultimate desire and ambition?
I think it was evolving. I couldn't say for sure. I think one of the big questions is, what would Rachael be doing now if she were here? But I know she had many talents and many skills, but I know that she was also really changed by her experience in Gaza, and that would have contributed to her next decisions about what she was going to do with her life.
I want you to say a few last words to Rachael today on Mother's Day.
I would just let Rachael know, Rachael, how much I love you.
We all do.
Yeah, and how much we've learned, and about the opportunity that you've given us to come to know the Palestinian people and people of the Middle East, people of the world, and how many people share with us the inspiration and the comfort that they draw from your story, and for your having made the journey.
Right. Cindy Corey, mother of human rights activist and martyr. Rachael Corey, many thanks indeed for joining us.
Thank you.
Always welcome. And we will be joined by the mother of another martyr, Tom Hورندال, who's always going to be a mother feeling something missing due to how she misses her son today, also on Mother's Day, but after the break. إذا فاصل قصير ونعود. لا تذهبوا بعيدا. جوسلين هورندال والدة الشهيد توم هورندال كيف تلقت نبأ فقدان ابنها المأساوي وماذا حدث وقت ذاك؟
Well, in 2003 I was in education and it was the final day of term and my name was called over a tannoy, which is quite unusual, and I was told while I was in school, it was my daughter on the phone, and so I went straight home. And that is how it started. And the phone never stopped ringing. You know, we were then in touch with the embassy in the ministry in London, and they gave us a great deal of support at that point. But we immediately had to go out to Israel to see Tom and to supervise, you know, his medical care, and then straight on down to the occupied territories and down on into Rafah. So within days of him being shot, you know, I had arrived in Israel and been taken down with the British Embassy to Rafah.
To Rafah, Rafah, and. When you've seen the body of Tom and he was not moving, he was in a state of coma, I think.
He was in a state of coma for 8 months and had a very serious head wound. And we were in Israel for 7 weeks while Tom was in a hospital in Beersheba. And we tried for 7 weeks to speak to the Israelis, to have a meeting with them, but they refused. And it was only at the end of 7 weeks, as it happens on the day we were due to take Tom home, that they agreed to meet us, which seemed extraordinary because they had refused all this time and actually accepted on the very day we were due to take Tom home. So we delayed that and then had the meeting with the Israelis.
And what was the outcome?
The outcome of the meeting itself was that we were going to produce our own evidence. It seemed difficult for the Israelis to provide their evidence and to contribute to the evidence together. There was no sense of reciprocity at this meeting. There was a lot of resistance, and we were able to address with them the discrepancies in the report that they had produced, which I have to say was a profoundly unprofessional report. Mm-hmm. They got the site where Tom was shot wrong. There were so many errors in it. You could not begin to call it a proper investigative report. Not yes. at all.
Yeah. Now, Tom was a young man who was wishing to make a difference through his solidarity action in the occupied territories and elsewhere. How did he take the decision and set out to go there? And how did you as a mother let him go? But I believe he went to Iraq also.
Yes, yes.
And before going to the occupied territories, to Rafah and the Gaza Strip, how did you as a mother, accept, digest that your son is going there?
With great difficulty.
Of course.
Tom didn't actually mention, although he'd been planning it for some time, he didn't mention it until the last minute. I did have a long talk with him, and he was an extremely bright young man. He felt very strongly about justice, about injustice that he was hearing, and having the very curious mind that he did, and being a young photojournalist, he wanted first-hand knowledge of what was going on. And I think there comes a point as a mother where you have to hand over the responsibility to your grown-up child for making decisions himself or herself. And this was one of those moments. I felt I was really unable to say to Tom, no, don't go. He was a clever young man, very determined to go, full of questions and energy and determination. Mm-hmm. And really there was no going back with Tom.
And today, what do you say to Tom after 15 years? And today we are just on the eve of celebrating Mother's Day. What do you say to him? Usually you should be waiting for him to prepare something to say to you.
Yes. Well, I think I miss Tom more than I can say. Mm-hmm. I miss his intelligence, his awareness and insight. I think of the times when he was a little boy, when he had this mind that was so curious and wanted to find out about things, and it was never enough to just give your opinion. You had to ask Tom his opinion. I would say
Are
to
you
him,
angry at Tom?
There's part of me that is angry at Tom, yes, but the love that I have for Tom, anger is part of love.
Exactly.
If I didn't love Tom, I wouldn't be angry, because it has had an effect, on all of us. But I think what Tom did was immensely courageous. It did show Tom to have an integrity that I think would have stood him in very good stead to be a foreign correspondent. He had those qualities. So I do say, well done, Tom, for your courage. But I miss you.
Yes, we all do, yes. Especially as a mother,
Yes.
and on such an occasion. How was your family transformed after the martyrdom of Tom?
I think it affected...
I believe that Sophie now works for medical aid for Palestinians.
Well, Sophie used to work for medical aid for Palestinians. All of us took a different turn, at that point. I came out of education, but Sophie now works for the Refugee Council, but she certainly was working for medical aid for Palestinians, and it felt very right that she was doing that. She felt, in the heart of the matter, heart of the issues.
And you've written a book also about Tom, Defy the Stars.
Yes, I have. I think when I gave up education, we carried out the justice campaign, but then I wanted to document everything that had happened. It was complicated. We were coming across concepts that I'd never needed to be involved with before. And so the act of writing it did help to clear out to understand those concepts better and to understand Tom better. And I wanted to leave a record behind for the future, not just for my family, but, you know, I wanted it documented in some way, in my perspective. You know, it was a therapeutic thing to do as well, so I think I wrote it for several reasons, but mainly because I wanted the truth to come from me and from my family.
From your experience, of course.
Indeed.
Jocelyn, you have written, in this sense, a commentary in The Guardian on the 10th of January 2004, just a couple of days before the passing away of Tom at the London hospital, in which you stated, quote, "It seems that life is cheap in the occupied territories. Different value attached to life depends on whether the victim happens to be Israeli, international, or Palestinian," unquote. Yet, you said, commenting on the award-winning documentary, The Shooting of Thomas Hurndal, "They shot our son, but they can't kill his spirit."
Yes. In fact, you know, that applies to so many Palestinians who've been killed, and it's the experience of many parents that you cannot kill a spirit, because in fact it seems that Tom's spirit and the spirit of so many Palestinians has not diminished, quite the opposite. They've gone on growing in spirit, because it's such an unjust act, such a cruel act. It brings out people's strong indignation, which in a sense fuels the star. It makes the star shine brighter, and you see things with more clarity. So as much as the Israelis carry out deeply oppressive, unjust acts, in actual fact, what is happening, it makes the issues clearer, brighter.
Jocelyn, I would appreciate a few last words to Tom.
Tom.
We miss you.
Yes, we miss you very much, all of us in the family. I wish you were here. I was talking this afternoon to some Celtic fans who are here. Tom
From
was in actual
Scotland,
fact
yes.
an Arsenal supporter, so I had to confess to them that Tom was not a Celtic supporter but an Arsenal supporter. But they were young lads, and you know, full of life and energy and determination themselves, and they were doing something very good, and they'd heard about Tom, so we had a wonderful conversation together. So I saw a little bit of Tom in all those lads. I think he would have been completely amazed to find out that he had made a difference, and that there are many people in the UK who were touched very deeply and whose lives did change.
Bless your heart, ma'am. Jocelyn Hurndal, mother of martyr Tom Hurndal, many thanks indeed for joining us. إذا لقاء جديد في الأسبوع المقبل مع ضيف جديد وقضية جديدة ودائما من الداخل. للمزيد من التواصل بريدونا theinside@almayadeen.net وصفحتنا على الفيسبوك من الداخل، من كل فريق العمل من كل الميادين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.